Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate so many amazing people across the state of Mississippi who are working in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. I love doing this show because it gives me a chance to talk to people of all walks of life. Some people that I talk to I've had on the show before. Some I like to have as regulars. But the fact is, there are so many committed people doing so much incredible work in our community. And some of the people who work in this community do a lot of work outside the community. And we get to learn from them. We get to learn from them about what they're learning about Mississippi, how Mississippi fits into this. We get to be fascinated by their lives. And our next guest is someone who kind of fits that description, my friend Marie Sanderson, who's the former policy director for well, look, I'm not even going to try to tell you all about her life, okay? She's worked for Governor Barber. She's worked for senators. She is a entrepreneur, a political entrepreneur. We're going to tell you all about what she's involved in here in just a second. But I just wanted to invite her in to talk to her about current events, what she's up to today. And I'm amazed by her and her husband, Brian's life. And you'll understand why in just a second. Marie, how you doing? Welcome back.
Good morning, Ricky. I'm so thrilled to be here today.
Doesn't it seem like yesterday in some respects and maybe 10 years ago in other respects that you and Brian and I were in the midst of the pandemic and you guys had started your effort to help small businesses? It seems like I can remember conversations like they were yesterday, and in some ways it was like it was another life. How does it feel to you to think about that?
Same way. Sometimes there's a memory and it feels like yesterday. And then other times I look at some of the progress we've made as a community, as a state, and it seems like lifetimes ago as well. So, it was such an important point in the country's and the state's history. And I'm just glad that we were all a part of it. And candidly, it brought us together. The Matthews and the Sandersons.
Yeah.
Although I wasn't a Sanderson back then. I was just another staffer.
Well, look, you guys have been involved in so many different ways. Brian and you both are involved in national stuff in a big way. So when you talk about what you do today, how do you talk about it with people?
I tell people that I think political entrepreneur, you actually coined that phrase, is a good example, but I do policy work. I do a little bit of political strategy, and I help businesses or elected officials understand how to get from A to B. And A to B can include policy changes at the state, federal, local levels. It will include how you talk about an issue, how you explain an issue, and also can involve who you actually talk to. Who are the stakeholders, the opinion leaders who can help you get that goal done? I like to tell people I write strategic plans, and I tell people how to get the job done, and I put people in play who can help them do that. So that is my goal these days, is just to figure out how to get from A to B is the easiest way to say it, Ricky.
Well, so you cut your teeth working on policy with Senator Cochran. You obviously work closely with Haley Barber, masters at policy that you had the opportunity to work for. But you brought a competency around this that policy is policy is not just about being able to write down what a policy needs to be, but it's about understanding politically how you can actually implement a policy. You got really good at understanding how all those pieces fit together, and people seek you out now, Marie. You've literally built a life around being able to help others think about how they can advance their goals. It's a very specific set of skills, but you understand that competitive advantage that you have, don't you?
I would say this. I was able to work for really smart people. Senator Cochran had a very thoughtful way that he dealt with complicated issues. More importantly, he had a vision about how someone should be treated. And I'd like to think I learned a little bit about interpersonal skills and having conversations about hard stuff. Haley Barber has never met a stranger and understands issues and is smart as a whip, and I had the opportunity to work with him. But I would like to, just give a compliment to my coworkers. I have the opportunity, as you noted, to do a lot of national work, and the people we brought in over time, my business partners for over a decade, are the best in the business, work on national campaigns. And so I like to think I've not peaked yet, but I have the ability to learn every day from the best in the business. and we have really great clients who are sharp in their own right, and we get to work together towards solutions every day. And I like to think that makes me better, and in turn makes me better at what I do here in Mississippi as well.
Well, you went on to be involved in the National Republican Governors Association. Brian's involved in that now. But to watch the evolution of all of this, the political environment, the changing media landscape, and to have been in each of these roles and in the role that you have now, and watching what Brian's been able to sort of maneuver as it relates to that as well. In so many ways, you're in the catbird seat. You've been able to watch an enormous shifting of the winds in the political scene of America. Do you sometimes pinch yourself to say, good Lord, we are like it's a front row seat. In a lot of ways, we're involved in a lot of this stuff. It's an amazing position to be in, isn't it?
It's been fascinating to watch. And the Republican Party that I joined 25 years ago is not the same Republican Party today. And you're right, I have been able to watch that from a front row seat. One of the things I've done throughout my career, and I credit some of my business partners, is we remain in the game. You're only relevant if you remain in the game. So we do a decent amount of pro bono work so we can advise elected officials, but it also helps us understand how the electorate is thinking. And there's no better example about how far we've come as a Republican Party than to look at the Republican Party today. The master of that is obviously President Trump, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. But what they care about, what these constituents care about, and how you communicate that to these masses has changed so much over the years.
It is significant, and you have multiple companies that you're involved in, but understanding the role that digital media has played in this. I talk a lot about the shifting landscapes, and I've written extensively about it just because, as a former publisher and a former digital media CEO, you can't help but pay attention to these things and not just pay attention to it, but marvel at how fast things have changed. How used to be very relevant media are so much more irrelevant today, and growing numbers of others who weren't even on the radar screen a year or two ago are now literally dominating the political conversations. I don't think we'll ever see that change again. I think one of the biggest things that happened, and all of this was happening obviously at lightning speed, but when Elon Musk bought X, that was a turning point in so many different ways, not just because we could see underneath the covers what was happening with social media companies in terms of diminishing conservative points of view, but again, once listen, free speech can be ugly. It can be nasty. It can be incorrect. It can be whatever. But I want to be the one who sorts through that. I don't want someone else to sort through that for me. The awareness of the average American about that now is like off the charts, isn't it?
It's off the charts, and it's changed the way people consume information, and it's changed the way messages are put out into the echo chamber and how that moves up the food chain, if you will, of media consumption. So influencers or just a normal person can post something, can post an opinion of that onto social media through whatever platform they wish to choose. And depending on who that's picked up by or retweeted by, or and then what media outlet picks up the next iteration of that, it kind of moves through the ecosystem, if you will, until then you have a situation where mainstream media has to talk about it. And that's where the change is. And I think that's where the president and his team are so savvy and so smart. They have always reached their electorate to communicate their goals beyond traditional media. And now you have traditional media trying to play catch up, trying to play relevant. It's really been fascinating to watch. And obviously this moves beyond politics, but the change really took place in politics.
It did. It was, and it was brought about by the smartphone, and it's amazing to me because I used to give speeches when I was in the middle of all this digital media stuff and newspapers trying to grasp their futures and all of that. To reflect that the smartphone, Steve Jobs introduced a smartphone in 2007, 2 years after Hurricane Katrina. I mean, just think about that for a minute. But that moment. And that intuitive device in the hands of everybody now around the world changed forever who controlled the news cycle. And I don't think that we fully appreciated at the time what it was going to mean, but it did. And if I had to like really crystallize it into one kind of like simple statement, it is that no matter what kind of media it was, whether it was network media or newspapers, there were always gatekeepers. Gatekeepers decided what we got to see. We did it at the Sun Herald. We would literally have conversations at the Sun Herald to say, is the community ready for that? We would literally have that conversation, and we would print something or not print something based on those kind of conversations. But the gatekeepers controlled everything. Now the gatekeepers no longer control, and it's literally driving them insane. Their business model, their ability to control the message has literally been obliterated. And I don't know if I know for a fact we'll never return. The question will be who rises above that and finds a way to have sort of an equal approach toward multiple voices. It will be interesting. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Marie Sanderson. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I'm visiting with my friend Marie Sanderson, who is a political entrepreneur. I think that's the best frame I can put on you. You're involved in so many different businesses, involved in efforts across the United States as a strategist and a policy expert. And when we went to break, though, we were talking about the gatekeepers, and I mentioned that I think that's the biggest change, that the gatekeepers no longer decide. People can now decide where they want to go. That is dramatic. It's dramatic in ways that maybe you, because you're close to it, and me, because I'm a former publisher and digital media CEO, there's no returning. We're in the Wild West now as it relates to media, aren't we?
We really are. And, at this point, when I have a client that's concerned about an issue, to what you said before break, I go see who's talking about it. Who's talking about it? How many times has it been liked or shared? Who are these people? What is their profile? What is their reach? Who are the types of people that are listening or following? That gives you an idea about the bent. Is it going to be a progressive or is it going to be a conservative angle? What does that mean for the story? And who cares about whatever's being talked about? So there's a whole industry now that spends time trying to understand this, because it can certainly make or break an issue or a product based on what's going on in the social media ecosystem.
Yeah, it is amazing. The other thing, I could mention, people tend to mention Joe Rogan a lot, and certainly that's important. But what I think Joe brought to the table, because I've watched him for many, many years, what he brings to the table is if you don't bring the ability to go beyond your first 5 minutes of talking points, if you don't bring the ability to bring depth to the conversation, you don't need to join Joe Rogan, because you will be found out. Maybe that's one of the reasons right. Kamala Harris decided not to do a show with him. But to observe the conversation between the president and Joe Rogan, or even Elon Musk more recently, over 3 hours of conversation that could go in any different direction. It's amazing. People want to see that sort of unscripted, real conversation. And then I think about, Charlie Kirk, 31 years old, from Turning Point. He's slowly but surely working his way up. Watching him go to these liberal universities and stand toe-to-toe with kids. And now he's got, I don't know, hundreds of millions of views. I don't know how many, Charlie. But Charlie has become kind of a relevant voice through all of this. Again, the conservative cream has risen to the top, and he can stand toe-to-toe with anyone. In fact, more recently stood toe-to-toe on the first show for Gavin Newsom, and I think did a fine job of challenging Gavin Newsom and representing conservative point of view. Do you know Charlie?
I don't know him personally, but I've been following him from afar for a long time. I have a colleague that I respect greatly in politics. She's a friend, and I asked her a couple of years ago, help me, who should I be following? I do a lot of listening, a lot of reading like you do, just to help me stay current. And obviously he said, follow Charlie Kirk. And I've been a contributor. I contribute to him and to what he's trying to do. And I watch what he does at universities, and I've found his messaging to be fascinating. And he's someone now that can change Congress's view on an issue in a heartbeat. And a lot of people fear him. A lot of people respect him. And so, yeah, he's come a long way. But again, I think it gets back to people want real people talking about issues. And he's become an opinion leader in his own right. Good for him. But he's been candidly at the front of this movement for a while. And now I think Main Street people are just now understanding who he is and the meaningful role he's played.
It will be interesting. I mean, he may have a big political future. Like I've said to you before, I think you have a big political future if you ever choose that you want to go in that direction. And before we get done with the call, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But let's go to the kind of the root thing that everybody's talking to, because I think that everybody, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, and as you and I have discussed before, I'm center right. I have center left friends that believe just about everything I believe. It's funny. They describe themselves that way, but we could put it down on paper and not say who we were, and we could match up the characteristics, and they would be very similar. And as you and I discussed, I think the majority of Americans are somewhere in the middle. We don't like big government. We don't want government messing with us. We don't want people, taking our guns away. I'm not for abortion, and that's a very strong religious belief that I have. But the reality is, most Americans are somewhere in the middle. Trump was out there, and you and I had many conversations about Trump, and thank God you were there to kind of bring me back into focus sometimes. But I'm in a different place as it relates to him, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But a lot of people were where I was, weren't they, Marie? I mean, and now they're watching every day. They get up every single day to see what the next chapter of this moment's going to be, because things are happening so rapidly, and they like it. They like what they see. And the Democrats are completely rudderless right now. But I'm not alone in that. Am I? Excuse me.
No, you're not alone at all. I would say over the past several years, I would get text messages from people who would say, is this really happening? Are we going to have another Trump 2.0? And I would say, yes, we are going to have another Trump 2.0. You will come to understand it. But the way he communicates with certain populations is extremely effective. They trust him. And I think you're seeing with the way he's constantly in the media, constantly talking about, to your point, he's not afraid of the media. He tells people exactly where he is. You always know where he stands. You may not like it, but the American people know where he is. And he has a strong team around him that are continuing to help propel that, talk about what he's doing. What did he say he was for? Promises made, promises kept. And you're seeing a lot of that as we march through the first 100 days of his administration.
Well, Marie, it has been fascinating to watch. It is beyond anything we could have ever imagined. I think back at what's the moment that made me start to think differently about this, because I've always had this this sense of, I don't like where we are as a country. I didn't like where Republicans were. I didn't like where Democrats were. I didn't think that people were talking to me. I felt that way constantly. Again, I'm center right. I think too often the polarizing ends were deciding the conversation, and I didn't like it. After the election, after the 2020 election, I didn't like some of the ways that Trump handled himself, and it seared in my memory about that. And I don't know if I could ever get over it, to be honest with you. But there's a lot about him that I liked. The moment that started to change me was when Ann and I were sitting there watching that speech in Pennsylvania. In the moment, we were watching it live, and when he ducked down, I told Ann, I said, those are gunshots, Ann. Those are gunshots. And what happened after that? This awareness of how tough he is, and how much so many factions don't want him to be president, don't want him to be successful, would do anything they could to stop him. It's when I started to think about that. I thought about, corporate, there's great history of various corporate leaders that were transformational leaders that would go into really, like GE, for example, go into big companies like that and have to make a lot of tough decisions that could really have tough skins and ride it through to fruition. And then people would see, gosh, that was a great vision. But at the time, obviously, they didn't see that. I was involved in big national level corporate change efforts, and the resistance is incredible. So I have this understanding of how that looks. But it became very apparent that for those of us who were in the position I'm in, and I think I'm speaking for a lot of people, we began to see in Trump a transformational leader, a guy who would go in there and build a team and make tough decisions, do it in a populist way, sometimes doesn't let the facts get in the way of good presentation. All those things are true, but at the end of the day, Can he stand tall against unbelievable opposition and do a major course correct? And I came to realize that he was the man to be able to do that. And it happened kind of suddenly after the Pennsylvania event. But I'm not alone in that either, am I?
You're not alone at all. And the president certainly gained momentum after that, but he was gaining momentum before then. The left has made so many miscalculations about where they think the American public was going to be on a number of issues. And I think people just said that's enough. I signed up to co-chair Women for Trump because I had had enough. And you saw people who wanted to get involved. His campaign had more volunteers who were ready to issue and change and who were ready to support him to get that done. Certainly, Vice President Vance is an excellent communicator, and he surrounded himself with a cabinet that knows how to get things done. They're change agents. He's making big, bold decisions that we are seeing. But guess what? He said he was going to do that. He's doing what he said he was going to do. And a lot of us got behind it. So yes, I think Pennsylvania, a lot of people who weren't following politics had a moment of how he handled that and how he came from a place of strength. By the way, he was there were 2 attempted assassinations. So this effort to keep him from doing the job he's now doing was very great. But I think at its very basic level, a lot of Americans, middle of the road Americans, were done. They were done with this Biden, Harris, progressive, almost milquetoast type of policy that was moving our country in the direction that none of us wanted for our children's futures. And that's why a lot of us got involved.
Wow, what a great conversation. And we'll pick it up from there on the other side. But you did some research in the middle of America. You probably saw lots of this beginning to gel long before most of us did. And we'll talk with Marie Sanderson about that when we come back on the other side. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. Hope you're having a great day as we come to you from the Citizens Bank studio, visiting with my friend Marie Sanderson, who is really, I mean, people say, I have never met anyone who has policy chops better than Marie. But she has really found a way to entrepreneurially help governors and people who need policy advice. She's really done a great job of that. We'll get back to the conversation we were having, but I was curious. If you think about the members of the cabinet right now, how many of those do you personally know?
I know a handful, and I've been in meetings with a handful. I know their character, I know their background. I would say more so I know a lot of the people around them. But these are people who, have been in this movement for a while, or they're entrepreneurial and they spent time getting to know the president. President hasn't put anyone in roles that he doesn't trust. And I think that's a major difference from 2.0, from 1.0, is that he had to know you had to trust this person, and they had to be a change agent. And, in some ways, his policy team, which is one of the best I've ever seen in an administration, led by Stephen Miller, they can teach a cabinet official, what the policy direction should be, but they needed people with the right personality to lead. And you're seeing that in some of these cabinet officials as they implement the agenda.
I'm curious, like Pam Bondi, did you know her well?
My husband and I do know Pam. She's great. I would say that relationship is more his, but we've known her for a while and think the world of her.
And Kristi Noem?
I do know Governor Noem. Yeah, now Secretary Noem. She's fantastic as well, obviously. I worked in Congress, was a really strong governor, and is an excellent communicator.
And there's others. We could just go down the list, and I think we would discover that you probably know every single one of them before it's over with in some way or another. But what's interesting, you make the point really good, that the underneath or around the teams of these, this from working with Senator Cochran, this from working with Governor Barber, that you take someone with Haley's capabilities as a governor, but he's only going to be as good ultimately as the team around him, because you're the ones who have to kind of work through the details of implementing these multiple policies, and particularly after Hurricane Katrina. What a great environment to learn how to be successful, and really that failure wasn't an option. It's amazing. But you think about the people that were surrounding them, and you have relationships with those people, so that's fascinating. You mentioned Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller in the first administration came across to me as a bit almost wacky, actually. The way he would express himself and a little bit far out there. He has grown in his job. He's always been a pretty good communicator, but the president's letting him get out there more now, and he's talking more now, and he's more mature, and the thing that I have come to understand about him is that this dude is smart. I mean, he's smart. I mean, he's really smart, and he has significant responsibilities on connecting the dots on all these things. It may look messy, but boy, there is a plan-defining direction here, isn't there?
Stephen is very smart. He is the architect of a lot of this. By the way, that role is well deserved, but he should not be underestimated. There's a reason why when the president announced his administration, the first role he announced was Susie Wiles, and in the same breath, he announced Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. Stephen is in charge of the policy. There's a huge amount of discipline that the cabinet and respect that the cabinet officials have for the deputy chief of staff, and I think that's really important. You noted that I worked with governors, and I've worked with governors across the country, and I've run transitions, helped governors run their transitions in various states. And what's always really important, and this is if you're a business person leading, the same thing's true. You want your number two to be respected by the people who work for you. If you're a governor and you're hiring your cabinet, you want your chief of staff to be at the table, because your extension has to be respected if you want your agenda pushed through. And you're seeing that in 2.0. I'm not sure that that gravitas was given to chief of staffs in Trump 1.0, but Susie and Stephen have that respect, and that respect is given to them by the president, and they're doing an incredible job.
Well, listen, as a conservative, we all, and you know the history, and you've already alluded to it, but the governor was not ready for that first term, and the people who were surrounding him, some were on the team, many were not on the team, and he was being undermined from inside, and he came to appreciate and understand that, and it caused him to recoil from that in such a severe way that once he got through 2020 and began to think a lot about it, by the time he came back into this, he made a very serious commitment that he wasn't going to be in that situation again. You mentioned Susie. I mean, look, at the end of the day, that's probably one of the most important decisions he made, because it was a mess in the White House before. They were I mean, I've read a lot about it, and now they're not a mess. You know Susie too, don't you?
No, I know of Susie. My colleagues know her better than I. But look, what a wonderful example to have the first female chief of staff. She's strong, she's smart, she's well respected, and she ran that campaign in a very disciplined way. So I don't necessarily know her personally, but I respect her greatly, and I know people who work with her who say she's just as smart as she comes across in the media and otherwise.
What about the White House press office? What bold decisions, I mean, in terms of leading it and in terms of what they're saying about bringing other media into the conversation. I mean, they're transforming the way we do that.
They know how to get their message out. That was very clear in the campaign. They know how to get to the person who's consuming the media, and they're doing it in really interesting ways. You can watch an entire press conference right now on Instagram. They do the MAGA Minute. If you haven't found that, go find it on any social media channel, and you can see Caroline Levitt gives an update of what's happened this week. That is really important and compelling. We no longer have to sit and watch C-SPAN and see Jim Acosta fight with, Caroline Levitt. It used to be Sarah Sanders. We no longer have to consume our information that way. There are multiple ways to get it. And I just commend the press team. They're criticized for the way they're running the shop. I actually think they're doing a great job of turning the media upside down to get their message out.
Caroline Levitt, 27 years old, was a former publisher and been around, news media my whole life. I thought, man, there's no way she can stand up to that heat. Holy mackerel. This kid is 92 years old in her soul. Have you ever seen anyone more capable of standing up there and taking the heat?
She's dynamic. She's impressive. And she's what the president needs at this moment. And I'm just so thrilled for her and the role she's doing. And I would say not only the president, the country needs her. Yeah. And she's doing an incredible job at the helm.
Hey, listen, you had been doing research in the middle of America, and you probably saw the tide starting to change along the way. Um, how substantial was that shift that you were beginning to see?
The polling that I had access to showed that the Pennsylvanias of the world, the Michigans of the world, Arizona's, North Carolina, these are our swing states, were so close. And we knew it would be tight, but we also knew that the types of people that were undecided were the types of people that typically don't necessarily break Republican. And I think a lot of that has to do with what you said in the earlier segment is that they found a way to talk to the working Americans, talking to them about issues they care about. And I even think you had women who, 4 to 8 years ago, the topic was about suburban women and how they were no longer able to vote for the president because of his personality. People don't necessarily care about the personality of the president anymore. They just want someone who can get the job done. And I think there was such a lack of leadership, even if you don't agree with what Biden did, there was such a lack of leadership. And the president, if you put Biden and Harris on the same screen and have Trump next to him, there was just such a trust that people have with the president and what he said, whether or not you agreed with what he was saying. And you saw that in the data. I mean, people were ready to vote for President Trump, and we felt like it would be a victory on election night.
It's shocking really to think that the Democratic Party had gotten so far to the left. I mean, just the border alone. I mean, the border alone, what a disaster. And I don't know if Elon Musk is right about that their goal was to bring a bunch of immigrants in and bring them to the swing states. When you look at it from that perspective, do you think there literally was a strategy that looked like that?
Look, I'm not sure if there was a memo internally stamped strategy, but sure. I mean, those voters may vote center left. The reality was they could close the border, and they didn't. And the top two issues that Americans cared most about, which was impacting these people we were talking about in the swing states, were the economy and the border. And every other issue was so far behind. And the Republicans, President Trump in particular, won on those two issues by large margins. And at the end of the day, that's why he won the election. And you're seeing them as he deals with Congress. He's working to get his proposals for the border funded. And he has willing leadership. Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune are working with him to pass his agenda. That's a discipline we also didn't see in the first Trump administration, is Congress being willing to work with him.
Mike Johnson, followed his career in Louisiana. What a return of events that led him to be the speaker, and what he's doing is something to behold. And the Senator Thune, I've always had tremendous respect for him, but man, these guys are herding cats in the purest sense, as Trent Lott has written about. When we come back on the other side, I'm actually curious about how it is to be a mother and your husband as a father when you guys are working on a national stage but living in Ocean Springs. Amazing story. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with my friend Maurice Sanderson, who has a long history of policy work really across the United States, but she worked with Senator Cochran and Governor Barber and has been really a principal leader in lots of important policies here in Mississippi, but now really around the United States. She's a policy pro and has multiple business she's involved with her partners, and I call her a political entrepreneur. She's someone you want to check in with from time to time. And I'm so happy to have her phone number and able to text her from time to time if I want to just make a comment that I can't say on my show, if she lets me. So that's good. Hey, listen, before we get to family, because I think your story about your family is a fascinating story, and your commitment to Ocean Springs is really impressive, especially given how much time you spend in an airplane. Last thing I want to mention, I wrote a column about this, but watching the Doge effort, it was never not going to be messy. There's no way for it not to be messy because he's stepping on so many feet. You know that. There's no way to do this that doesn't create a massive tsunami of uproar to try to stop him. And I think the president picked the right guy to do it.
He's breaking glass. There's stories of the GSA turning into a Silicon Valley operation where people are sleeping in bunk beds right there in that building off near the White House. Look, he's trying to figure out what is vital to what is core to government, and where is the waste. And look, half of this is a communication effort, to share the waste that they're finding, but he really is, kind of lifting up the lid. And there are a lot of when you do that are stakeholders that are going to be impacted. But it had to be done. I saw an Obama administration quote the other day where someone said, he's actually doing what we tried to do. And I think that's fascinating. It is time for someone to do this. Congress will have a say so. There will be and roles that need to be reinstated. Should that even be the case, will be. But I love watching what he's doing from afar as well.
Hey, listen, the average American didn't even know what an NGO was. They didn't even know what it stood for. But the average American now understands it. And they understand when we say layers of NGOs, ways to hide the money. I've always known that was there. You've always known that was there. Those are sort of the sacred cows that are buried all through our bureaucracy. And we didn't have presidents with the capacity to go challenge all that. And I'm so happy we're working through it. And look, I wish they would communicate better, but at the end of the day, this has to be done. It just absolutely has to be done. And I think that's why so many Americans support the effort.
The Americans want to see us get a hold of our budget. I don't spend money outside my means. Neither should the American government. And we are spending and we are spending. And I think whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, having, a pro-con list of should this be funded, should it not, and asking the hard questions is really needed. I give a lot of credit to Stephen Miller. There is a way to do this. The way this is policy wonk, but they, changed the categorization of some of these employees so they could actually make these fires or give them some type of package to take leave and move on their merry way, hopefully to the private sector. That took some thinking through. And they didn't spend the last 4 years upset about the last election. They were planning for a Trump 2.0, and here we are, and man, are they rolling.
Yeah, they're definitely rolling. How are you continuing to roll with your beautiful family in Ocean Springs, with you and Brian on the road all the time? I know you said before when we talked, it takes a village, but Ocean Springs provides a great foundation to your life, doesn't it?
Ocean Springs has been such a blessing for us. I'm from Jackson and grew up there and loved Jackson, knew that Brian and I wanted to live in Mississippi. We actually met on the Gulf Coast. You were a part of that. And it was important to Brian to be on the Gulf Coast. But when we travel the way we do, it's nice to come home to people who have the same values we have. I like to call it my village, groups of friends, the schools. It's just an easy place to live and raise a family. And our children are so happy. And we knew that when we would maintain the careers we have without moving to a big city, that the opportunity cost would be that one of us, and it is usually me, spends a couple of days on a plane every week. But our children are happy and they're thriving, and I give a lot of credit to the coast, but particularly Ocean Springs, for how we're able to live this life.
That's so awesome. Listen, I feel this way, so I'll say it out loud. I can literally see Governor Marie Sanderson, the first governor of a woman governor of Mississippi, but it has nothing to do with woman. You're capable. Will we see that one day?
Ricky, right now, I'm just loving the role I get to play in national politics. I am loving playing a role with strategy. I do love our state greatly. And, right now I'm raising some young kids, and we'll see where life takes me.
That's such a safe answer. Such a wonderful, safe answer. But you can't, what's interesting, because you're traveling the country, working with governors and working with all these different people who are trying to make a difference. You're learning best practices. You are literally a storehouse of best practices that can make Mississippi stronger. So even if you don't want to do it, eventually Mississippi is going to say, we need you to do it, just because of the experience you've gained and how you can help kind of advance the ball for Mississippi. And thanks for representing us so well when you're out on the road. God bless you.
Well, thank you for that. That's very kind of you to say. I get very blessed. And I love my home state. And anytime I can be helpful, all my friends who are elected officials know I'm a phone call away. And I do enjoy visiting with them when I can.
That's so awesome. This has been Marie Sanderson, my good friend. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.